Everyone. Okay, so in the last class we were talking about basically enzyme catalysis and uh, different models. With we started an example of myoglobin, hemoglobin. Okay, and how myoglobin and hemoglobin are different from each other, and why they exhibit different oxygen binding and different oxygen release behavior. Because in one case you have one unit binding and releasing oxygen in the case of myoglobin, and it's kind of tetrameric. It is tetrameric in hemoglobin, where four units communicate with each other and then coordinate binding and release. Okay, so today we'll talk that a little bit in detail and then develop a model which can explain different features observed for hemoglobin. Okay, so let me start sharing PPT. So hemoglobin, as you know, so this is a slide I showed last class. So how myoglobin and hemoglobin differ each other in terms of oxygen binding capacity. Okay, so here the graph shows at different oxygen pressures. Okay, and how what is the fraction of the protein which saturates with O2. Hmm? And also marked regions are blood oxygen pressures in veins where oxygen gets released, and oxygen pressures in artery or in heart where oxygen actually is bound. Okay, so myoglobin shows sigmoidal hyperbolic behavior, and hemoglobin shows sigmoidal behavior. So mostly it's binding, it saturates with oxygen binding in arterial blood pressure. And however, most of that oxygen is released compared to myoglobin in veins where actually oxygen is needed. Okay, so that's oxygen binding capacity, but so what, uh, okay, but it has other features. Okay, so the features are depending on the pH and depending on how much even CO2 is present. Okay, so first one is effect of pH. pH. Okay, so as CO2 gets built up in tissues, okay, so where actually oxygen is converted into work and finally CO2 gets released. So because of CO2, so the acidity increases. Okay, so pH. Okay, so in peripheries where actually, for example, let's say work is done in tissues, periphery. Okay, so where CO2 is converted into carbonic acid. So due to this, pH is lowered. Okay, so pH here is lower than the normal physiological pH because you have CO2 buildup. So this lowering pH has some effect on the binding capacity, oxygen binding capacity of hemoglobin. Okay, so pH roughly it changes. Okay, so the range, I think it's 7.62 roughly, very small change, not huge. Okay, so pH, for example, like 7.62, it changes to 7.2. So though you think that this is a small change in pH, but it has some effect on the binding of oxygen to hemoglobin. Okay, so if you see the curves, pH effect, again, uh, let's say let's say partial pressure of O2 and then fraction of binding. Okay, percentage binding. So this is I'm showing for hemoglobin. So the curves will be sigmoidal. Okay, so this is a certain pH. Okay, so that's roughly 100%. So that's at 7.6. Okay, so as the pH gets lowered, and when these red blood cells are in this periphery, so the pH is low, 7.6 to 7. So this pH actually shifts slightly this curve to right. Okay, as lower and lower pH, this gets shifted. So that's at 7.2. Okay. So again, physiologically relevant region is somewhere here. Okay. So this is the region physiologically relevant. So a small change in the pH now shifts the curve towards right on the oxygen pressure axis, showing that at lower pH, for example, let's say 7.2 here. Okay, so it needs more oxygen for saturation. Means that in veins you don't have more oxygen. So basically, whatever oxygen is bound gets released efficiently. Okay, so again showing that pH acidic effect in veins again enhance the releasing capacity of oxygen from hemoglobin, or hemoglobin has less capacity to bind oxygen. So this effect is called Bohr effect. Okay, so Bohr effect, where change in the pH has effect on the oxygen binding capacity of hemoglobin. So that's one aspect. Okay, how pH can actually has additional effect. And second thing is that released carbon dioxide. Okay, so carbon dioxide again binds to hemoglobin, and that also has effect on uh, uh, this. So carbon dioxide also has the same effect. Okay, so carbon dioxide binds at the same binding site, or sometimes actually can carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide this, but carbon dioxide has additional effect. Okay, it can actually affect side chains as well. Okay, some side chains get modified. Okay, so some side chains, okay, side chains can also get modified. So this is either carbon dioxide can bind at the same axis, and it can have some effect on the side chains. So both also will have actually shift this curve to the right. Okay, so you can have the same axis. So CO2, higher and higher amount of, sorry, so this is always we are looking at binding efficiency of oxygen. So at higher CO2, so this gets shifted. Okay, at higher CO2. Okay, so this is kind of regulation. You know? So this is competitive binding. So where CO2 can bind at the same site as oxygen. And there are other regulatory molecules. Regulatory molecules. Okay. So there is some molecule called DPG. I think DPG means let me say, I don't
Diphosphoglycerate.
Diphosphoglycerate, right?
Yes, sir.
DPG is diphosphoglycerate. So this is another molecule which also binds binding to hemoglobin. Okay, so this also has effect on the oxygen binding capacity, and again this shifts the equilibrium of binding. Okay, so again if you have a DPG, Okay, so DPZ curve. The DPZ also is the same thing. So you have, let's say if you try to measure oxygen versus percentage of oxygen saturation. So again, sigmoidal curve shifts to this. Okay, so at higher DP. Okay, so in the whole blood, if you have to simulate whole blood conditions, so then you can add basically these three components. Okay, low pH plus CO2 plus DPG. So all in the end, further, so what we have seen is that that's for myoglobin and this for hemoglobin, right? So now if you have low pH, CO2 and DPG, so this further actually shifts this, okay? So this is for HP, right? Okay, so low pH, okay? Let me just write pH plus CO2 plus DP. So all these molecules further shift and increase basically cooperativity or regulate the binding capacity. Okay, so then how do I understand this in a model? Okay, so how exactly, let's say, binding of DPZ molecule, which binds at a different site than oxygen, has regulatory effect on oxygen binding of hemoglobin. Okay. So this is a simple way to think is in cooperative effect. Cooperative effect or let's say concerted mechanism. Okay, so where you assume that, so your molecule, for example, let's say your hemoglobin is basically 4 myoglobin units, right? Okay, 4 myoglobin units. So each unit you think as a protein which has 2 conformational states, okay, or okay, 2 conformational states. States, okay, so which are in equilibrium with each other. Okay, so these states you can write as one is called tensed for T as one conformation, or relaxed or R another conformation. So these 2 conformations are in equilibrium with each other. Okay, as individual units. But so there are 4 units in hemoglobin. So now you can write these 4 units as like this. So where in all 4 units are relaxed. Okay, so R you can write all these 4 units as in this conformation as T. Okay, so you have 2 conformations. So each circle or square represent 1 myoglobin unit in hemoglobin, and each unit can be in 2 conformational states. Okay, this is the simplest model to explain. So where you just label one is as tensed and another is relaxed, and all these 4 units can now imagine can exist in this either relaxed or tensed. So the extreme states are relaxed, where all 4 units are in relaxed state, or one conformational state where all 4 units are tensed. But now you can write a sequential equilibrium where only one of them turning into at a time. Okay, this. So in this case, one unit turned from circle to square. Means that only one unit in the tetramer converted to a relaxed to tense conformation. So now this can be in equilibrium with another unit also turned into tense. Okay. So where the second unit turned to tensed, okay, from relaxed, and the other two are in relaxed, and so on and so forth. Okay. So you will have basically total how many states possible? Let's say there are 4 units in one hemoglobin. Each can be in tensed or relaxed. So total how many states are possible? Hello? Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say each unit has 2 possibilities. Square or circle or tense or relaxed. But you have 4 such states. Each one can change, let's say, independently. Okay, this is called sequential. Okay, sequential process. So total how many states can be possible? How many individual states I can write?
2 to the power 4.
2 to the power 4 will be
16.
16.
16 states. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so 2 to the power 4 states. Okay, but not all states can be distinguishable from each other, right? So for example, so this, when all 4 relaxed and tensed, you have only one possibility. So you have only one possibility where all 4 can be in relaxed, and you have only one possibility where all 4 can be in tense state. But individual ones, so here, let's say out of 4, 1 is in tense state, the other 3 are relaxed. So you have actually 3 other types. So where you can label, let's say if you can label 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can have actually 4 conformational states which are equivalent, which are same. You can't really distinguish which unit is which. Okay. So then some are indistinguishable, but some are clearly distinguishable. Okay. So this is one case. Now, so this is independent of ligand binding. Okay. So we are talking about a molecule existing in what I can say multimeric state, where individual proteins can be in 2 conformations. So then this is a possibility. So now we have to add, okay, so plus ligand. Okay, so plus ligand. So now ligand can bind, because all 4 units are same. This is a homomeric model we are talking about. So each unit can bind one ligand. Okay, imagine. So, and each protein can be in tensed or relaxed. Ligands can bind R, P, but with different binding capacities, different binding strength. Okay, different, let's say K, let me call it this. So different K. Ligand can bind both states, but however, so it preferentially binds one state than the other. For example, let's say if it binds relaxed more, okay, and then less. So if it has preferential binding to R than T, then it prefers if you have equal number of R and T. Okay, so then it will bind, let's say, R more. Okay, so it can bind both, but the binding capacity of R to this is more. Okay, so then Because then you see in this state, okay? So first equilibrium, where all the relaxed to this, okay? So then here all are in relaxed state, and then definitely if you have only equilibrium between this and this, and then imagine to begin with, these are equally probable. But now if you add ligand, because ligand specifically binds R, so then the equilibrium is actually shifted towards the R. Because in the absence of ligand, you have equal populations. So this side, but the moment you add ligand, so ligand binds to both conformations. However, it prefers R more. So this actually shifts the equilibrium towards this. Okay. And imagine now you start with tensed state. Okay. So where the ligand binding okay, for a moment I lost you guys. You guys can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for a moment I
Yes,
lost.
yes.
Okay. So now let's say imagine the ligand is if this state is predominant to begin with. Okay. So the moment ligand binds to one of these states, can shift this to, so where you have, okay, so where you have 3 tense states and 1 relaxed state. So the equilibrium can shift because the ligand preferentially binds R. Okay. So because both conformations are different from each other, so typically you can't have the same binding constant because structures are different. Obviously, the ligand prefers one over the other. So here we are assuming that R is that preferential state. Okay.
Sir.
So that's one thing.
Sir, I have a
Yeah.
question. In the
Yeah.
resting state of the protein, does the P and R state always remain in equilibrium, or one state predominates in the system always?
No, what do you mean predominance? Equilibrium means that equilibrium. Okay. So
All the states are remains in the system, or only P or only R exists there?
okay. So that's what we are talking about. So they are in equilibrium with each other. Okay. So depending on the thermodynamic stability. Okay. So one, let's say if the binding, it depends on how these units are interacting with each other. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Begin with. So if the interaction stability is more in R versus T, okay, so then preferentially the equilibrium shifts to 1. So in the case of hemoglobin, so there is a tilt in the equilibrium because, for example, let's call R state. So in R state, somehow the molecules have additional strength because they form additional salt bridges, okay, with each other. So relaxed state is more predominant. Okay, so let's put it like that. Okay,
Okay,
so so now just I want to show you one picture. Okay, so where you can really appreciate. So where so let's say if I have to show the bound one is filled circle. Okay, so versus this. So depending on how much ligand is there, the equilibrium can shift. Okay, so everyone can see. Let me try to put near the camera. Okay, you see, so this is a Cantor and Schimmel book. Okay, so everyone sees my image.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
This is a beautiful cover
Yes, sir.
page. I think this is volume 3. Okay, so where it is depicted that at the top row is protein. Imagine a tetrameric myoglobin, that's hemoglobin, where there is no ligand. So you have now all possible states clearly. You can see the squares is tensed at the left, and then extreme right is basically circles, relaxed. And in between states, though you think that there are 2 power 4, 16 states are possible, some are indistinguishable. So the middle three, there are, you have basically depending on which unit is turned, so they are distinguishable, but these are kind of indistinguishable states. You have five possibilities. But now imagine you added ligand, low concentration, such that only one of these four can bind because limited ligand is available. So then again, you see you have five possibilities. Okay, because only one of them is bound, because 5 unbound versus 5 bound. Now imagine you have more ligand. So then let's say 2 of 4 possibilities can saturate. Then you have again 5 possibilities. Let's say if you have more ligand, let's say 3 out of 4 states are can bind, then you have 5 possibilities. And then the last one, you have so much ligand, it doesn't matter which state the protein is in. So there is enough ligand. So then all 5 states are binding. Okay. So total, how many you have here? Basically indistinguishable states, 5 into 5, 25 states. Okay. So you need to really appreciate the complexity now. Okay. So now, so depending on how much ligand is available. Okay. So the saturation changes, and at the same time, which states are populated. Okay. So here, that
May I
picture,
ask a
what?
question?
Yeah, just a minute. What is missing in that picture is that, so which state is populated more or which state is populated less? The picture shows that all possible states, okay? But in reality, we have to know that which one exists more, which one is less, because of the binding. So then you have to, like I said, these are equilibrium between different states. So you keep adding these equilibrium constants for this all this equilibrium. Okay. So now we assume that the picture basically simply assumes that all K's are identical. If all K's are identical, then basically you have all states possible. Then you have 25 possible states for hemoglobin. But in reality, you don't have all 25 states existing together, but some are preferred much more than the other. Okay. So typically in the unbound case, you have only majority of the population shifts either in the completely relaxed or completely tense, and in between states. Okay. So these are low populated. So very low. Okay. So this is because the cooperativity between the transitions. So imagine that circle is a different, a sphere, a circle in this case, is a different shape compared to a square. Okay. So then you can fit if all are either squares or all are circles. Okay. So in between, somehow they don't really communicate with each other better than either all squares or all circles, means that in between states are less populated, and equilibrium either shifts to completely relaxed or completely tensed. So this is what we call cooperative. Means that, let's say if the molecule is in tense, the moment, let's say, one of these subunits wants to turn to relaxed, either it makes sure all other three need to be turned, or this go back to tense state. So this is cooperative process. Basically means that these equilibrium constants, okay, either they are high towards the relaxed or high towards the tense. Okay, only two states for the multi subunit proteins are possible, and in between states are less and less populated. That already reduces, so your oxygen binding thing here. So you can now almost ignore in the central 3 states. Okay, at the top unbound case, you have 5 possibilities. And then the middle 3, where actually either only 1 or 2 or 3 units are in different conformation with respect to the remaining in that in that multimer, okay, do not really exist. So they want to be either all in tense or all in relaxed. Okay, so then I'll take question and then I'll come back. There was a question.
Hello.
Yeah, someone was asking a question.
Yes. I'm Mitradeep.
Mitradeep.
Yeah. So the question was that you are assuming the indistinguishability while
Yeah.
considering the states, but if I imagine the way hemoglobin looks like, I think the 4 marks there are two different types of configurations, right?
Yeah, so we are assuming at the moment, okay, hemoglobin
And
consists of 2 alpha subunits and 2 beta subunits, but don't worry because these are very subtle differences out there. Okay, imagine alpha and beta are same. Okay, but in reality there are other examples where you have all units are identical to each other. But here, yeah, they are slightly different, but for practical purposes, assume alpha is equal to
and the other thing which I was worried about is in the middle state where you
beta.
have two relaxed and two tensed.
Okay.
Let's say instead of both the relaxed being placed parallelly, they are placed diagonally.
Yes.
So will that have a different kind of energy? Because in that case, it's like two alphas are relaxed versus one alpha, one beta is relaxed.
So the moment again you say that we label, let's say if we label 1, 2, 3, 4, you say that 1 is 1 and 4 is 4 and 1, 4 and let's say 2, 3 are distinguishable, then of course the possibilities number will increase. That's all. Okay. So for simplicity purposes, we are assuming that all 4 units chemically similar to each other. Okay. So then model simplifies. You see that already this simplified model itself gives rise to many different possibilities. Okay. But otherwise, including that, let's say alpha is different from beta. Okay, will lead to another problem. And another question you raise, very interesting point. Okay, the middle structure which I'm showing here. Okay, so where two squares and two circles. Okay,
Yes.
so you can say that now this is two can be adjacent to each other or they can be diagonal.
Yes.
Okay, so you think that they are different from each other. So again, for practical reasons, I have written 4 in a 2-dimensional form. But if you think that these 4 are in 3 dimensions, okay, you can't really distinguish from each other. So then there is no diagonal versus neighbor. Okay, so what I'm talking about, let's imagine 2 dumbbells. Okay, 2 dumbbells put each other. Okay, are tetragonal. Okay, let's say imagine tetragonal structure. So then all 4, you have 4 apexes, but then all 4 are identical to each other. So you can imagine that model instead of the square. Okay, so are 2-dimensional. That solves that problem. Okay, so now question is that, so in this, to explain the cooperativity which we have seen in the hemoglobin. Okay, so the way to explain that is that, so though all states are possible because of the equilibrium constants, so these structures are predominantly, okay, preferred compared to the in-between states where the subunits are different from each other in terms of conformational states. So they want to be in all identical conformations, either in relaxed or in tensed. Okay, but if imagine if all equilibrium constants are identical to each other. Okay, so then hemoglobin would have exactly behaved same as myoglobin. Okay, only thing is that it's basically tetrameric. Okay, but if because all 4 states are independent from each other, so then basically all independently exhibit behavior, okay, of myoglobin, and there is no dependency on its neighboring unit. Okay, so but we know that in reality hemoglobin behaves myoglobin is because, so though we have written all possible states here, but predominantly these end states are observed because of the cooperativity or the communication between the subunits. Okay, so that's the predominantly different behavior between a cooperative enzyme or the protein which binding ligands versus independent monomeric protein like myoglobin. Okay, so how do you then explain the effect of, for example, let's say pH or CO2 or let's say DPG? Okay, so as we have seen, for example, let's say an DPG, diphosphoglycerate. So adding DPG somehow shifts the sigmoidal curve to the right. Means that if you have DPG, so then the saturation is actually shifted to higher concentrations of oxygen if DPG is present. Means that now, so this equilibrium, you have original equilibrium of, now I'll write only R and T, okay, R versus T. So assuming that in R, all four are relaxed, in T, all four are tensed. This equilibrium, okay. So now let's say if you can affect this equilibrium somehow, okay. So let's say R prefers oxygen. Means that if you have more conformation of R, then more oxygen is bound. But somehow if you shift this equilibrium to T, okay, so then you have less oxygen binding because O prefers relaxed. So DPG actually shifts this equilibrium, okay. Oxygen shifts the equilibrium to this side, but the DPG shifts the equilibrium to this side, means that R2. So originally you have certain equilibrium, but now because of this molecule binds to individual units of subunits of hemoglobin, and then shifts the equilibrium more towards T. Okay, means that now you have more and more T, means that less R is available, so less oxygen is binding. So to shift this equilibrium towards R, you need more and more oxygen. Okay, so that's the reason. So DPG is a inhibitor, you can really call kind of inhibitor or regulator. So regulator, which actually by binding to a non-ligand binding site, shifts the equilibrium to tense, okay, so that now less R is available, so less oxygen binding. And same thing really happens with pH at low pH, okay. So at low pH means that some of the side chains are protonate, okay, because you have more protons are available or more acid is available. Again, because of the change in the pH or change in the pKa, not change in the pKa at lower pH, you have more protons are there, so more side chains get acidified, and then that shifts this conformational equilibrium to T. Again, less oxygen is binding. Okay, and so these are CO2, okay, DPG and pH. Okay, so these are regulators, DPG and pH. Why do we call them regulators? Because they are not really binding at the same site as oxygen. Means that they are not competing. Okay, so oxygen site is still available, but because of the conformational flexibility, oxygen doesn't really. So these are called allosteric regulators sometimes. Okay, allosteric regulators, because they are playing with the equilibrium of these conformational states, okay, by binding at a site different from the ligand. But however, molecules like, let's say, CO, okay, or to some extent CO2, compete with the binding site of oxygen. So that's competitive binding, okay. So where they are directly common binding, okay, so they don't really shift the equilibrium R and T per se. Okay, but they are actually blocking, even though you have R, but the sites are actually blocked. Because of that blocking competitive binding, so then you have less and less sites available for O2. So CO2, for example, doesn't have to really shift the equilibrium. Okay, but it can just block the sites which are available for O2, so that less and less O2 is binding. So there are two different ways of regulation. So you need to really understand this. Competitive binding, where the sites are not available for the ligand to bind, okay, direct competition, or somehow change the equilibrium so that you have less and less molecules are present in that conformation state for the ligand to bind. So that's allosteric regulators. Okay, so all these things are actually put in a simplest model, this relaxed and tensed model. Okay, so is the given name to what is called MWC model. Okay, so this is Monod. Okay, I forget name. Monod Wyman change UI. Okay, so this is called MWC model. Okay, so Monod Wyman. Okay, Wyman and change. Okay. Model. Okay, so they put basically this together, and assumptions are of this model. You can have the molecules need to be to explain basically cooperativity or the allosteric in this case. So you need to have these protein molecules or enzyme molecules. Okay, multimeric. Meric means that you need to have more than one subunit, minimum two. Okay, multimeric, that is 4 in the case of hemoglobin, and symmetry. What's important is that symmetry. Okay, so they are arranged in such a way that they need to have some symmetry axis. Okay, so in the case of let's say tetragonal, okay, or basically let's say squarish, you have the symmetry axis. So where you have, let's say, diagonal units are similar to each other, or for example, like a CH4 kind of symmetry, let's say. Okay, so then you have tetrahedral symmetry. Then you can have again all units are identical to each other with a symmetry axis of, let's say, C4, C3 or C2. Okay, so that's very, very important to exhibit this. Let's see assumption. These are the assumptions. Okay, and each subunit in this multimeric unit have at least 2 conformations. Okay, each subunit has multiple, okay, to simplify this, 2, okay, conformations. Okay, so that's the second thing. You need more units, identical units connected to each other. That's multimeric. At the same time, they cannot be just linear or some other shape. They need to have some symmetry. And each subunit has multiple conformations. Okay. And third one is that ligand binding is preferential to a conformation. Okay, so though the subunit can have, let's say, at least 2 conformations, the ligand needs to be preferentially binding to only one. But if the ligand has no preference, so then it doesn't matter whether you have a multimeric, because, or if it is a multiple conformations, because the ligand is not able to distinguish. If it doesn't distinguish, then having these two is also not really important. So this is also an important assumption where the ligand preferentially binds one of these conformations and then stabilizes, okay? Or it basically, depending on the ligand concentration, you can actually convert the equilibrium to this conformation. So these are the three main assumptions of this MWC model to explain how the cooperativity arises, for example, in oxygen binding and release of hemoglobin, as well as small molecules like DPG, change in pH, would gives rise to different cooperative behavior, how this cooperative behavior can be regulated. Okay, so that can be explained. So I'll just give one more example. This is an important enzyme which is also well studied for cooperative. Okay. Okay, so this is called ATH or ATCase. Okay, so which is an enzyme. Okay, converts adenosine. Let me see what is the substrate. Adenosine. No, aspartate. So it takes aspartate, an amino acid, and then combines with carbamylase. Okay, carbamyl phosphate. Okay, and then gives rise to carbamyl aspartate. Plus an organic phosphate. Okay, so this is AT. Okay, so this is an enzyme does this reaction, and this is important. Purine or pyrimidine? I think it's purine. No, sorry, pyrimidine. Pyrimidine part. So basically DNA synthesis. Okay. So that you have DNA nucleosides, which will be helpful for making DNA and then cell division and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is one of an enzyme which is important for this. But however, like I said in the initial classes, okay, so you make only, let's say for the cell division, you need to make only one copy. Okay, you don't have to have multiple copies of DNA. You make exactly one copy, but perfect copy. Okay, so for all these things, you need certain amount of nucleosides, and then depending on how they are consumed, so you want to make only that. You don't want to really make excessive, and at the same time you don't want to inhibit the synthesis, right? So this is the step which is catalyzed by ATPase, but then it needs to know that how much aspartate needs to be converted to this product, carbamyl aspartate. So then if there is more aspartate, then more is converted, right? Okay, so but sometimes let's say you want your aspartate not just for this reaction. Aspartate is important for, let's say, protein synthesis. Okay, so then you need this reactant available for other reactions. Okay, but this enzyme, if it is available, it says that okay, so aspartate it converts, so then to regulate that, even in the presence of aspartate, you want to really temporarily inhibit this enzyme. So then you need to bring in a regulatory factor. Okay, so one of these downstream products called CGP, okay, cytidine triphosphate, comes back, okay, and then inhibits. Okay, so typically the sign is this, inhibit. Okay, so if more aspartate is there, more ATPase, so then you have this, But then as further reactions are going down, somehow you have more of this nucleoside. So then it comes and actually binds this ATPase and then inhibits this reaction temporarily. So this is called feedback inhibition. Feedback inhibition. Okay. So for most of the enzymes inside the cell, so this is how actually it functions. So they have this defined role in catalyzing a reaction for enzymes, and then somehow you can actually control the enzymatic activity of that enzyme by regulator factors. So we will see that how this is again an allosteric enzyme where you can actually apply MWC model and understand its basically function. Okay, so I'll show you a picture of what is. Okay, well, this is what I talked about, equilibrium between tense and relaxed states. Okay, that's DPZ reaction. Okay, okay, so that's the enzyme.
Sorry, but
Oh, you can't see the slide, sorry.
yeah, can't see the slides.
Sorry. Let me share. Okay, so this is that enzyme ATCase, aspartate carbamyl transferase. So where aspartic acid reacts with the carbamyl phosphate on this enzyme gives rise to carbamyl aspartate. Okay, and the reactants are aspartate and carbamyl phosphate. Okay, so this is a feedback inhibition. So let's say X0 to, sorry, that should be X0, X1, X2, so on and so forth. And E1, E2, E3 are enzymes. And then Z is final product. So Z can come back and then inhibit E1 enzymes so that even the reactions X1 onwards, the products will be controlled. Okay, so this is different feedback loops are available inside the cell depending on which chain of reactions you want to really control. So ATCase, let's see what is ATCase. So this is much more complex than hemoglobin. Hemoglobin in the sense that much simpler compared to this, where it has only 4 units and then all 2 are slightly different from the other, but almost the symmetry is like tetrahedral symmetry, means all 4 units almost identical to each other. So here ATCase consists of 6 subunits. Okay, so each subunit has what's called C, okay, catalytic subunit, and R, a regulatory subunit. Okay, so you have 6 molecules come together, form the structure. So each subunit has a C catalytic subunit, which is shown in blue, and R is regulator. Okay, so you have 6 molecules, but what you see here is that towards you only C1, C2, C3, and the other 3 are at the behind. Okay, so C4, C5, C6, and you can see they are arranged in symmetrical fashion. Okay, so you can see that C3 is a symmetry axis. Okay, and you have R1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, again 6 subunits coming from 6 subunits you see. Okay, so this is a hexameric protein. Now it will bind, each subunit can bind aspartate and then catalyze reaction. Okay, so what will happen, for example, let's see quickly a couple of examples. Okay, what will happen, for example, let's say if you have to measure velocity of a reaction, the reaction, the enzyme catalyzing, versus substrate concentration. Okay, so in a normal reaction, okay, so your velocity of the reaction versus substrate concentration. So the normal enzyme have hyperbolic thing, okay, where we learned Vmax and so on and so forth. But the allosteric one have a sigmoidal. Okay, allosteric. Okay, and normal enzyme. So normal enzyme, you see the board I'm talking, okay. Okay, so normal enzyme, you can see the board.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So normal enzyme has hyperbolic behavior, and then allosteric has sigmoidal behavior. Means that in the allosteric enzyme, initially the reaction is very slow at low substrate concentrations, but then in between it's much faster, and then it will rapidly increases, and then almost reaches saturation, and you don't really need very high concentration of substrate for it to continue to completion. Okay, so that's basically how graphically they are different. But now let's say you add an inhibitor. Okay, so in the case of ATCase, the inhibitor is cytidine, okay, which is a very downstream product of this chain of reactions. Now, how will it actually can come and bind? Okay, so I'll show you what is observed. Okay, so in the node CTP, I'll just show you the behavior and then explain why that is. So we are talking about this. Let's say a substrate is aspartate. Okay, and on the y-axis, velocity of this reaction. Okay, so at when there is no inhibitor, okay, so this is what it will go. Okay, so it's a sigmoidal shift because it's an allostatic enzyme. But however, so this is no inhibitor, no CTP. But now let's see if you add a little bit of CTP, and then what they observe is this shift, okay, plus CTP. Okay, so adding CTP is somehow inhibiting. Okay, so then how do we explain this in terms of MWC model? Okay, so we learned in the MWC model, the enzyme needs to be a multimeric, have a symmetry, and each subunit in that multimeric enzyme can bind and catalyze reactions, and somehow this individual subunits can be in different conformations, and then ligand preferentially binds one. Okay, so then after seeing this observation, let's say there is no inhibitor, so it is allosteric. Obviously, there is a shift in the equilibrium between the tense and relaxed states. And then after adding CTP, the curve is shifted to right. So curve is shifted to right means that, so how do we explain this in terms of R versus T? Okay, so in the R versus T, so let's say R is what is the main catalyzing conformational state, and T is not. So then in the absence of CTP, so the equilibrium is actually more towards R. So you have a reaction is catalyzed. But however, having CTP, so this changes. Okay, so on adding CTP, so you have more T and then less R. So that's why enzyme concentration is shifted. But however, if you add more and more aspartate, okay, more and more aspartate, but still the reaction can proceed, it can overcome the effect of CTP. Okay, so so that's another way to look at it. Okay, so another way to look at it is that, so you actually change change the CTP concentration. Yeah. So here we are actually varying the substrate concentration and then trying to see the reaction velocity, normal enzymatic way. Okay, so let's say if you do the other way. Okay, so let's say if you want to look at with respect to inhibitor and then inhibition percentage. Okay, so how much can be inhibited? Okay, so at a given substrate concentration, so as you have increased the CTP, so this is at, let's say, aspartate, a fixed concentration. I'm giving a number, let's say, okay, so let's say 1 millimolar of substrate, and then it inhibits something. Okay, but if you use the same reaction at higher concentration of substrate, let's say if you do the same reaction at, let's say, 10 times of this, so then you have this. Let's say if you have 10 millimolar. Okay, no, let's say 10 times less. Aspartate should be higher. No, okay, now we are plotting inhibition. So inhibition is less. Okay. So let's say if you have done, so this reaction where your substrate is, let's say, 1 millimolar. So if you add more and more CTP, so the inhibition is higher, but it will not saturate 200. Okay, so this is about 20%. Okay, so at certain aspartate, because it's not able to inhibit 100%, because aspartate somehow shifts this equilibrium even if you have a lot of CTP. Because CTP can be catalyzed even these concentrations. Though you completely shift to this, okay, though aspartate prefers R, but it can bind to T as well. Only thing is it has less binding constant, but nevertheless it binds. So that's why even if you have very high concentration of inhibitor, still the inhibition is not 100% because the enzyme is able to catalyze even in this state. Okay, though this is less preferred by the substrate and R is preferred by the substrate. But because R is not available, now the substrate binds to T state and then catalyze the reaction. So that's why inhibition is not 100%. But now if you have less substrate, that's much less than this. Now the inhibition is more, okay, so let's say this is 80%, is because now you have less enzyme, so that's not really binding strongly enough to this, and that's why your catalytic efficiency is less, or in other words, inhibition is more. Okay, but in almost no case the inhibition is not 100%. Okay, so that's one reason, is because aspartate binds T as well, but low Ka to CTP binds, okay, does not block aspartate binding site. Okay, so this is because CTP doesn't really bind the same site as aspartic acid, so that's why you are able to catalyze some reaction. That's why inhibition is not 100%. So this is okay, non-competitive one. Non-competitive. Okay, so you need to really understand the difference between this. So non-competitive binding, so that's why the inhibition is never 100%. But if it is a competitive binding, then inhibitor can block your catalytic sites and then do this. Okay. So then to compare this with competitive binding, okay, so then we need to use a molecule which binds same as the aspartic binding site. Okay, so for this there are molecules available for this. So that is succinate and malate. Okay, and malate. Okay, so these are the two molecules, so which look a bit similar to aspartic acid and then can bind at aspartic site. Bind at aspartic acid site. So this is competitive now. These are competitive, right? Competitive binders. So then let's see if you do the same analysis, which we have done with, let's say, inhibitor CTP. How does these experiments look like? Okay, so one experiment and very interesting observation, what they have done is that, let's say as you increase malate, but mind you, malate is not a natural substrate, means that it doesn't give the same product as carbamoyl aspartate. But what they have done is that you change the malate concentration, okay, at a given aspartic acid concentration, of course, plus enzyme. And what we are plotting is that activity. Okay, so at low concentrations, okay, at low concentrations of malate, the activity actually increased, and then it reached a maximum, and then it decreased. Okay, so this is a behavior I think you need to really understand very, very carefully, and it's counterintuitive because malate and aspartate bind at the same site, but the malate doesn't give product. Aspartate gives product. Means that aspartate gives basically activity enzymatic. But then question is that at initial concentrations, you would expect if more and more malate, it actually blocks more and more aspartic binding sites and then less enzymatic activity, right? But it's counterintuitive here. So at small concentrations of malate, the activity actually shooted up. Somehow having small malate actually enhanced aspartic acid binding. And then it reached a maximum. But then if you add more and more malate, actually now it is acting against aspartic acid and the activity is less. Okay, so this is a very important behavior. Again, exemplifies our R versus T. Okay, so in this case, the beginning conformation is mostly intense. Because it's mostly intense, the enzymatic activity is less because you're not able to switch, okay, to R where the catalytic reaction is actually much favorable. So at low aspartic concentrations, so the reaction doesn't really proceed because it wants to be in R. Okay, so aspartic acid actually binds preferentially to R, so it's not able to bind to T, so no reaction. But having small amount of malate combined with aspartic acid, so now there is a mixed binding. So you have 6 sites here, right? So if I can put, so you have 3, E, and then, okay, so there are 6 molecules. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So some sites are saturated with malate partially. So switching this conformation to R when binding small concentrations of aspartic acid. So shifting the equilibrium to R, catalyzing the reaction, okay, much more efficiently than only aspartate. If only aspartate is there, it's not enough that it's to switch the equilibrium to R. So that's why having a little bit of malate switches this equilibrium to R, where the catalytic activity is happening. But however, when you have more malate, then all the sites are actually blocked. Okay, so then all the sites are actually blocked. Okay, and it is in T, so the no sites are available for aspartic acid. So that's why at higher and higher concentrations, the activity actually goes down. So this is actually kind of very important example where all the assumptions, okay, and all the analysis which comes under MWC model can be applied to this in terms of equilibrium between the different conformations, how the substrate can have preferentially one conformation over the other, and how the inhibitors and the regulators, whether the competitive inhibitors binding, competing with the substrate, are binding at allosteric site and regulating the enzymatic activity, or the binding in terms of shuttling the equilibrium either towards R or T, would have an effect on enzymatic activity of this. So these two examples, hemoglobin and ATPase, if you understand, so then basically most of the aspects of enzymatic kinetics, enzymatic regulation are actually dealt, because a lot of data is available on these two molecules. Okay, that's why these are textbook examples. Okay, and given that and so I explain very few aspects of these enzymes, but there's a lot more. So you can really think of whatever we have done, R state versus T. What does it mean by structurally? I mean, how does R state structurally looks different from T state? Okay, what conformational changes can we really look in the protein structure where these conformations are actually occurring? For example, let's say in terms of Sol bridges. So that's one of the areas people have looked in the hemoglobin, how the Sol bridges between alpha and subunits as well as within alpha and beta subunits, intramolecular Sol bridges, how do they get affected when the hemoglobin changes the equilibrium between relaxed and tense states. Okay, so people have actually really looked at it. A lot of data is available, but I simplified really because this is a basic course, so I simplified all these aspects. But if you are interested, you can actually read very interesting observations. And then these are so well understood by now that we can really understood and develop these models. Again, MWC model, I explained the positive cooperativity. Okay, means that how, for example, like this malate is positive cooperative. Okay, so it's actually enhancing the enzyme at low concentrations but inhibits at high. Okay, so these kind of things can be explained by MWC model and against sequential model. Sequential model is simply, for example, let's say you can assume all the intermediate states like we have done in the beginning, and you can assign the equilibrium constants, both forward and backward rate constants, and you can actually do a lot of modeling by putting these rate constants and then see that at a given ligand concentration, okay, what states might be possible existing, okay, what are these populations, okay, how you can actually visualize these, for example, let's say concentrations. I think with that I'll conclude the course. Sorry it took really longer than I wanted, because I wanted to really give elaborate picture from the beginning where we started, the contents of cell, different types of cell, different physical macroscopic properties, organelles. Then we delved into important molecules like DNA and protein. Then we studied their structure, and then we discussed a lot in the protein point of view, beginning from the amino acids, their structures, properties, interactions, binding, energies, different types of interactions. And then we studied secondary structure, tertiary structure, and then we understood Ramachandran plot a lot in detail, all the conformations, different extensively different secondary structural elements, because I typically focus on Ramachandran plot a lot in this course, because that's, I believe that one of the important aspects of protein structure. One is to really understand that different types of helices, where exactly the binding. Then we moved on to the physics models of understanding conformational transition, and we studied extensively helix coil interactions. And then we looked at tertiary structure interactions, quaternary, and then we talked about, to some extent, binding, and then enzymatic calces. So in that sense, we covered broadly biology in terms of biochemistry and biophysical aspects. But again, though this is basic course, these two topics themselves can have much more than what I really taught about. For example, I didn't really touch anything about membranes, membrane proteins, lipid concentration. So, but it takes really long time if I have to really cover all those things. But I'm happy that I covered whatever I wanted to really teach, though it took a really long time, but I finished. I think we covered more than like 40 lectures or so. Okay. And I'll give you now, I think, 3 more assignments. Okay. I'll try to email you today or tomorrow. And then we can actually fix an exam date. Now my course is concluded. So when do you want your exam? So today is April 7th. Is about a week is good enough for you to prepare? What about next Wednesday or next Friday? Hello?
Sounds good for me.
So
Okay.
it will be fine.
Okay, so
It's fine
next
for me.
Wednesday or Friday. So I'll try to give the assignments so that you can work on through the week and weekend. So how about next Wednesday?
So next Friday.
Okay, how many for Wednesday and how many for Friday?
So next Friday.
For me, it is Friday will be good.
Okay, now next Friday, do we have any other class?
So we have mathematical course. Yes.
Okay, because this I would say 2 hours. So I need 2 uninterrupted hours. Because Ravi takes really long time to teach. He doesn't really finish by 11. That's the problem.
So,
So then next Friday, 11:30 sharp, and then 2 hours. Sounds good?
Okay, sir.
okay, sir.
Okay. So then exam content. So I'll give you 3 assignments from the, I think, helix coil transition onwards. And exam will be, because we had a mid-sem exam that covered till that point of time. So what I want to do is that, so I'll give 70% of the questions from the second half, the part which I taught after the mid-sem exam, and 30% comes from the previous basic ones. Okay, is that all right?
Yes, sir.
This is fine, sir.
Yes.
So roughly 70% from the second half, where I didn't give the exam, and then 30% from the basically from the beginning to half. Okay, so then we fix next Friday 11:30 to 1:30 exam. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
And
Sir,
yes,
sir, I have some doubts regarding this.
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Sir, in this, when you were telling about this DPG binds with the hemoglobin and decreases the affinity towards the oxygen, can we say that the DPG has 2 phosphate group and the 1 carboxylate group, which is negatively charged, and this can form some salt-base type interaction by stabilizing this T state. That's why it is decreasing the affinity of hemoglobin towards the oxygen.
Yeah, so we didn't that's what I mentioned. We didn't really talk about the structural specifics of these molecules. How do they get actually affected? Yes, so that's a possibility depending on what function groups it has. I think it forms some salt bridges as well. So, but it doesn't bind. What's important to remember is that it doesn't bind at the same site as
Yes, sir.
oxygen. That's all. That's the
Yes.
most important aspect. But then it binds other side. Okay. How does it interact? Of course, then we are going into structures. That is what not I discussed, because we didn't really discuss about exactly hemoglobin structure in terms of how these 4 units are actually binding to each other. What are the exact contacts? How these contacts get changed when the conformational transition occurs between relaxed and transition, relaxed and tensed. But yes, what you're saying is basically yes, correct. It
Okay, sir.
might be
Sir,
using its functional groups, both phosphate and other ones, in basically binding and then converting or inducing conformational change. Okay.
okay. Sir, I
Next.
have another question
Yeah.
regarding the last class. In the last class, when we are dealing with this comparative inhibition,
Mm.
then I saw the kinetic graphs model. Then in this double reciprocal plot, I saw that the Vm value, the V maximum value does not change, but the Km value changes for the comparative inhibition. I am not getting the point why this is so. Please elaborate on that.
No, well, I don't have my notes with me. What you're saying that Vmax changes? Double
No,
reciprocal?
sir. In the comparative model, the Vmax value does not change, but the Km value changes.
Yeah, but Km is basically K1 plus K minus 1 by K1, right? K minus 1 plus K cat by
K2 by K1. Yes, sir. K minus 1 plus K2 by K1.
correct. And so, but Vmax is actually K cat plus enzyme concentration. Okay. But if equilibrium is shifted, so that then let's say, imagine if K1 and K minus 1 are actually changing. That has
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
that has influence on the Michaelis-Menten Km. Could be. But
Yes,
I
sir.
derived clearly the expressions, and then so double reciprocal plot. What's important is that you need to know what are the intercepts on both y and x-axis. That's all. These are simple mathematics. So there's nothing too complex. So there are actually, in fact, very complex models are available. Now, for example, Cantor and Schimmel, the reason I like is that, so this is actually kind of written by physicists. So it's actually physics approach of enzymatic analysis. A lot of quantitative analysis means literally writing the equilibrium constants for each step, okay, from the R to T, and then using those rate constants in deriving, factors, overall equilibrium constant and intermediate concentrations and so on and so forth. It's there, but that's too mathematical. That's not for the basic course. But why I suggest these books is that, so that if you are interested, then you can actually read more. That will really enrich your knowledge. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any
Absolutely.
other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. If there are no questions, thank you guys once again for taking.
Hi, sir. This is Manikandan. I have one thing.
Money. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, sir, I am in home now. So as we
Oh.
discussed, can I give the answer sheet, scanned answer sheet?
Okay. So you're not coming back by next Friday?
I don't think so. I booked on next to next week.
Okay. We will figure something out. Okay. So.
Okay, sir. Fine. Yeah, just let me know.
So yeah, but exam will happen the same day. So keep that time.
Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah, sure.
but we'll work it out. Okay. Okay. But all
Yeah,
others.
sure.
Okay. So all others. So please come to AGET next Friday. Maintain social distancing, because I don't want you to submit online papers. Then it's a problem for me to first of all monitor as well as, correction. But come to AGET next Friday. Wear your mask. I'm sure now all are vaccinated. That's a good sign, good thing. And then we'll finish the exam. Okay, only that day you have to come to. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
sir. Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank
There
you,
is
sir.
one request.
Yes.
So next Wednesday, can you please organize a tutorial kind of class, that if any kind of doubts are there?
I see. Okay, like I have done in the mid-sem. Okay, I can do. I'll come myself. So next Wednesday we can have the same 1.5 hour, 11:30 to 1. So then I'll be here to discuss. Is that okay?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, bye bye. See you then.
Bye.
Wednesday.
Bye, sir.
Nice.
Okay.